For the second year in a row here in my area, we're going to have extremely cold temperatures that are going to have a detrimental effect to our ornamentals and our garden plants in the landscape and in the garden. However, this year I think it's going to be a little bit different in terms of how the cold moves in, which will impact how our plants react to the cold as well. In this video, I want to talk about the differences of the flash freeze of 2023 versus the January 2024 freeze, which we're about to have. And I also want to give you 5 methods for keeping your plants warm during this cold spell. Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Warren, and you're watching The Plant Doctor. Let's get started. So let's talk about why the freeze of 2024, at least in my opinion, is not going to be as bad as the flash freeze that we had of Christmas of 2023. So in the Christmas of 2023, we went from 55 degrees, give or take, to 8 degrees over the course of about 3 hours. So plants have biochemical reactions to kind of prep themselves for cold weather. They'll take water from inside of the cells and move that water outside of cells so that as the ice forms, the cell walls don't burst and leaves die. That's what we saw happen with a lot of our plants in 2023. Things like tea olives and loropetalums and gardenias. They just couldn't handle it. It got so cold so fast that literally the entire plant's defoliated. A lot of them came back in the spring, but some of them died. This year, I don't think that's going to be the case. The reason being is leading into this cold event, what we're seeing is it's a gradual step down in terms of temperatures. So for example, today it's cold. We are like 3 days out, 72 hours out from this ultimate cold that we're going to have of around 7 degrees. But today's cold. We started off around 27. We're only getting up into the 30s. Tomorrow, same thing. We're going to be lows in the 20s. And then the day before the event, the lows are going to be in the teens. The highs are going to be in the 30s. And then 3 to 4 days out from now, we are supposed to go all the way down to 7 degrees. With wind, and the wind chill is going to be down in the below 0 range. We're going to have negative wind chill factors. Going to be very, very cold. But the fact that 3 or 4 days in advance it has been cold, these plants have kind of prepped themselves already for that extreme cold event. In 2023, we didn't have that. The week before that cold snap, we actually had some highs in the 60s. I saw some green vegetative buds wanting to come out on some plants. Plants were starting to wake up thinking, hey, it's warming up. We can leaf out a little bit. And that wasn't the case. This year, I'm hoping, and my professional opinion is that we're not going to see this complete defoliation of some plants that we saw in 2023, but nevertheless, we still want to protect those plants. So let's look at these 5 ways that we can protect our plants. So the first way that we can protect our plants is just to have some sort of mulch on the ground. So in this bed here, I have black-eyed Susans, I have echinacea. These are a lot of native perennials in this bed. It's absolutely gorgeous in the summer. And I already see some leaves starting to pop up that I want to protect that are going to be crucial next spring for getting these plants up and going again. So one thing we can do on these low-growing perennials is just come across and put some pine straw or leaves over the top of them. And what this does is it acts like a little blanket, and this is actually going to hold in some ground heat. It's going to keep that hard wind off of that tender vegetation. So we've got a layer of insulation over the top of the plants that's going to keep them a few degrees warmer than the ambient air temperature that's just above them. Another thing that we can do, if you have several small plants, 1 or 2 small plants that you just need covering up, if you have a 5-gallon bucket laying around the house, simply just take the bucket and lay it over the plants. This is going to do several things for us, especially if the sun's out. So if the sun's out, the air that's inside these buckets is going to heat up. And the buckets actually protect the plant in a couple ways. We're keeping the wind off of it with the buckets. As that air heats up in this bucket, it can be several degrees warmer inside of the bucket as opposed to outside of the bucket. So we're getting some wind protection and we're increasing the air temperature around that plant by having a bucket on top of it. The third thing we can do with potted plants is move them to a south-facing wall. So that right now I'm sitting facing due south. You can see the sun shining directly on me. The brick or the vinyl on your house will actually absorb the heat throughout the day as long as the sun is out, and at night it will radiate that heat back out. So we can take our potted plants and put them right up against that wall, and it will be a few degrees warmer. And that's what I'm going to do with these potted pansies. They look terrible right now. We had a ton of rain last week. I think they're fighting a little bit of botrytis because they've gotten too much water. They need to dry out and they'll flower right back out. But I don't want to overstress them by exposing them to a lot of cold over the next 3 or 4 days. So we're going to put them right up against the house, keep them just a little bit warmer in the hopes that in another 2 or 3 weeks they'll flower back out. If you have really tall shrubbery or really tall trees that need to be protected during the freeze, one thing you can do is, as we get below freezing, is begin to come out and spray them with water. This is called wall of watering. So we're building layers of ice on top of the foliage in hopes that it's going to insulate the foliage. Technically, it doesn't insulate. What happens is there's a little bit of energy that gets released when water freezes. And like if you remember back to your freshman physical science class, anytime there's an energy conversion, what happens is some of that gets released as heat. We're taking advantage of that. This is a temporary fix. It's going to work for a few hours, which might be all you need in your case. I know that our friends down in Central Florida, the citrus growers, this is what they're going to be doing over the weekend. They are going to be spraying down those orange trees in an effort to protect them. That's one of the mechanisms that they use on the citrus, and it works in other areas as well. You may be thinking to yourself, Dr. Warren, it's going to be 20-something degrees. I don't want to be out there with a hose. I'll give you a pro tip. One thing that you can do, if you have an oscillating sprinkler, set it up, turn it on, and just let it start running. Come check it in like 30 minutes. If you've got good ice accumulation, you can turn it off. If you need to continue to water it, just let it run. That way, you're only out in the cold for maybe 2 minutes to set up your irrigation to turn it on, and then you're just going to come out and periodically check it and turn the water off once it's done. On intermediate shrubs like this tea olive here, the fifth thing that you can do is take a bed sheet or a blanket, put it over the top. Once you have your shrub completely enclosed in your bed sheet or your blanket, take some bricks or cinder blocks or pavers, whatever you have, put that down around the edge of that cloth so when the wind blows it doesn't blow off, and that is going to help keep these intermediate shrubs protected from this hard freeze that we're about to have. This tea olive looks terrible. In the flash freeze of 23, about 2 weeks after that, it dropped all of its leaves. It didn't have the first leaf on it until like late May. This is 1 year's worth of growth on it post that freeze, and I want to do everything that I can to protect this plant again. This is very, very unusual for my area to get 2 really, really hard cold snaps in back-to-back consecutive years. Some of these plants are already stressed from the previous year, and I'm going to do everything in my power to protect them. So here again, things in my area that got hit hard were tea olives, gardenias, loropetalums, and some azaleas. In particular, some of the encores got hit really, really hard. Guys, as always, thank you for watching The Plant Doctor, and until next time, happy gardening.